Howdy, my name is Bill Cremen, and I thank you for joining me in this video. I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce my colleague here, Zion. I had several horses to choose from, but I decided on Zion because he's a testimony to the transformation that a troubled horse could go through. You see, when I started on Zion, there was no Lope. He went straight into a run, and when you got him all settled, you'd prance all the way back to the corral. If you took him into an arena, he'd lift his head and he'd just want to bolt. And well, I think we got that worked out. One of the reasons I believe that we were able to work things out is that Zion and I worked together. We worked on building trust. You see, horses depend on you for leadership and guidance, and Zion and I were able to develop a relationship. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but when it comes to horses, I do know what's working and when it's not working. And when it is working, I'm able to recognize it and, more importantly, pat myself on the back and congratulate my horse. But even more important, I know when it's not working. And when it's not working, I stop. I stop and I breathe. How many of you pay attention to your breathing? That's something that we're going to be focusing on. One of the mantras I used to give my employees in my professional career was plan your work, work your plan. Think about this. If you don't have a plan, you're essentially rudderless. You have no clue where you're heading. So I want you to also think about this. You horse people out there, you do realize that a horse can feel as little as a fly land on them. Think about this. If a horse can feel a fly land on them, if you're having problems and you become fearful, frustrated, or angry, you don't think your horse is going to pick up on that? That's something to think about. So I'm going to give you something to think about. Do you realize that horses have been known to pick up your heartbeat from within 3 feet of them? So when you're approaching your horse very well may be able to feel what you're feeling. So if you have a nice, calm, rhythmic heartbeat, you're giving your horse one message. When you walk up to your horse and it's rapid, erratic, you're giving your horse another message. So what message do you want to give your horse? Now, we're all going to make mistakes. I understand that. And what's most important is that when we do make mistakes, that we're able to stop and think about what it is that's going wrong. Remember, plan your work, work your plan. If something's not going wrong and you proceed, all you're doing is making the problem worse. So it's essential that you're able to stop, think about it, what you were trying to do, visualize it, and then execute again. Most likely you're going to have a much more positive outcome. And this video is going to help you a lot with that. So pay attention. Now, the purpose behind the video. I had no intention of creating a video, but after time and time again listening to my students tell me what they've heard and they've seen on social media, I decided to do my own deep dive. In doing my own deep dive, I came away with the understanding of why you guys might be feeling so confused or frustrated, angry, even defeated. So, I believe that the creators of that content had to have good intent. I just believe that they're misinformed. So it's my intent, my goal in this video, to present you another option of riding, and that's called centered riding. There's a whole other style of Western riding, which is actually more popular, called stock seat. And I'm going to get into that more when we get into the trot and the the jog and the lope. So when I think about it, when I watch a rider on a horse riding correctly, I don't think it's almost like an art form when they're riding as one, when they're united, when they're gliding on their horse, essentially when they're riding with their horse. To me, it's just a beautiful thing to watch. And it's not only just beautiful to watch, it's exhilarating to experience. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So pay attention. All right, we're going to get into that. Now, I'm feeling like I need to start from the beginning to do my duty to make sure that you guys all have the proper fundamentals down. Otherwise, I'm setting you up for failure when we move into centered riding. So I'm going to begin as if you know nothing, next to nothing. So I'm either going to validate what you already know, you're going to learn something new, or you're going to question what you've already learned. So what I want you to do now is think of building blocks, all right? We are going to start building blocks, and our foundation is the center of these blocks. One of the biggest issues and stumbling blocks I see people have with their horses is a lack of confidence. All right, so when you have a lack of confidence, usually the reason behind that is you have no plan. You're confused in regards to what it is you're trying to do. So, in talking about building blocks, my belief is that with information comes knowledge, and with knowledge comes confidence. So, my whole goal for you is to start from the beginning to make sure you have the confidence in order to be successful as we move forward. So, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the stirrups and work our way up. All right, the stirrups is going to be, this is all about positioning now. So with our stirrups, all you want in the stirrup is the balls of your foot. All right, not your tippy toes, not your whole foot, just the balls of your foot in the stirrup. All right, this is going to be essential. Now also, the proper footwear is really important too. I really highly recommend that you wear a shoe that's got rubber sole. Like for instance, my shoe's got a rubber sole right on the bottom. So you want to go with that rubber sole if possible. Smooth leather just doesn't cut it. It's going to make it a lot more difficult for you to keep your foot in the saddle, or in the stirrups rather. And a lot of you probably already have difficulty keeping your foot in the stirrups, which I'm going to cover. So balls of your foot in the stirrup. Next step is to get your heels down. Now you cannot get your heels down far enough, so don't worry about that. Your goal is to get those heels down, all right? Now, one of the biggest issues I see with people from the get-go, all right, from the get-go, they're defeated because their saddle, their stirrups are not fitted properly to them in order to be able to ride, especially in centered riding. So I'm going to show you exactly how to know you're fitted properly to your saddle. So what you're going to do with your free hand is you're going to hold the horn. And then in holding the horn, you're going to stand up in your saddle with your heels down. All right, so you see how I'm straight up with my heels down? The next step is I'm going to take the palm of my hand, and I should be able to take the flat of my hand and slide it right underneath the front of my crotch, not the back, the front of your crotch. Now you should be able to slide your hand in there, and at most should have an inch between you and the saddle. If you have more than an inch, your stirrups are too short, you English riders, so no cheating, all right? It's imperative that you have the proper length, all right? So that's how you'll know you're fitted to your stirrups properly. If you can't get your hand under there, your stirrups are too long. So it might feel uncomfortable for you, but it is crucial that your stirrups are fitted properly, at least if you want to do centered riding, which is what the focus of this video is about. All right? So, give you an example. With my heels down, if I stand up in the stirrups, again, with my heels down, if I bend over and touch my horse's mane with my head, I feel perfectly balanced. If my toes go down and my heels come up and I stand up, I'm not about to bend over because I am totally off balance. Not only that, look how much movement I put between me and the saddle. So your goal is to keep your heels down, all right? Heels down. So the next step is to point your toes forward. The reason you want to point your toes forward, I see so many riders riding with their toes pointed out. The reason you want your toes pointed forward is because you're going to take the pressure off the inside of your knees. If you turn your toes out, you're going to feel the pressure against your knees. When you turn your toes forward, there's no pressure on your knees. So it behooves you to keep those toes forward. All right, so to recap, ball of your foot in the stirrup, heels down, toes forward. Now, in stock seat, if I could change anything about stock seat, it's about how much weight you have in your stirrups. I don't know why there's somewhat of a controversy around this, but my belief is that the more weight you have in your stirrups, the safer rider you are. All right? So, stock seat, you tend to have more of your weight in the seat of the saddle and less weight down into your stirrups, which makes it less safe, in my opinion. Now, I feel like I need to elaborate on this, all right? So work with me. Horses are flight animals. If something scares them, they're not going to buck. Most people that come off their horses is not from a horse bucking. It's from a horse shying and spinning away. Again, because they're flight animals. So, the more you think about your feet as anchors and you can get your weight down low, the safer rider you are. So I'm going to give you another example or another fun fact, so to speak. Do you realize that horses, when they're out in a herd, can synchronize their heartbeats? Not only do they synchronize their heartbeats, but the reason behind it is for a defense mechanism. So while they're out there grazing, if all of a sudden one horse's heartbeat starts to accelerate, it triggers all the other horses and lets them know that there's an alert. So when you're out there on your horse and his ears perk up, probably it's a good sign that you might want to be alert, all right? So you want to pay attention to your heartbeat, all right? So remember, a horse can pick up your heartbeat from 3 feet away. They're looking for reassurance from you. If their ears are perked up, they're already on alert. The last thing you want to do is add to that. You want to be calm and reassure them that all is good. So, you hunter jumpers out there, shout out to my daughter Jessica. Keep that in mind when you're approaching a jump. Be aware of what's going on with your heart so that you can reassure your horse that's all well. So, bottom line, get some weight in your stirrups. So, how much weight should you have in your stirrups? I'm going to give you an exercise, all right? So when you get on your horse, what I want you to do is to pretend that your stirrups are now bicycle pedals, all right? So with your heels down, what you're going to do is pedal forward, all right? Or pedal backwards, rather, so you're pushing your heels forward. Now, you see how my legs are moving, right? I've got my weight in the stirrups. You know you can't get a bicycle going unless you put weight in those pedals. As you're doing this, freeze. When you freeze, you're going to feel the weight in your stirrups. Once you have that weight in your stirrups, that's what you want, all right? Keep that in mind. That's got to be part of your plan. Weight in the stirrups. It's crucial. Okay, you can't have enough weight, so don't worry about that. A good rule of thumb, especially out on the trail, is nobody should be able to ride up next to you and knock your foot out from underneath that stirrup. That's how much weight should be in your stirrups. And just to drive my point home, I'm going to give you an example. The other day I was out on a trail ride with some friends, and the woman, two women behind me, she was a very good rider, and so she did exactly what we were talking about. She had her weight down in the stirrups. The lady right behind me had her hotel key card in her back pocket, and there was a breeze out, and all of a sudden she lost that key card and it just fluttered away. The horse behind her just ducked and spun, all right, and she handled it just perfectly. If she was just sitting and relaxing and most of her weight was in the seat of the saddle, she would have come off that horse. So again, weight down in your stirrups. All right, so balls of your foot in the stirrup, heels down, toes forward, weight in your stirrups. Now, that is our foundation. If we lose this, when you find yourself trotting and those toes go down, you've lost your foundation. So you need to stop and start over, all right? Start over. Okay, so now we've got the feet. We're going to move up to the legs. How do we get our horse to go? One of the biggest mixed messages that I have seen people give their horses when they want to go, actually prior to that, one of the biggest issues people have with their horses, when they get scared, what do they tend to do with their legs? Squeeze, you're right, they squeeze. So if you squeeze your horse, you're telling them to go, but you're scared and you don't want to go, so you end up pulling back on the reins. At that point, if not before, your horse has come to realize he's got a clueless rider on his back. Now keep this in mind, if they don't feel you're in charge, that you're not providing the leadership that they need, they'll take control, all right? So that is a problem that you have created. So stay off your reins when you want your horse to go. So in getting my horse to go, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn, that is when you'll turn your feet out, all right? So you're going to turn your toes out and you're going to come straight into the sides with your calves and your heels. But before you kick your horse, especially when you're on an unfamiliar horse, you always want to start by squeezing. If the squeeze doesn't work, then you're going to kick, all right? And again, you're going to come straight into the sides. You're not going to come back, but straight into the sides. Now, you can clearly see that I have spurs on. Spurs are a tool, all right? I only use those spurs if absolutely necessary. To tell you the truth, I feel naked without them, and I hardly ever have to use them, but I know that I've got them. So for those of you that think spurs are cool, the last thing you want to do is wear spurs if you find that you're having to grip the horse's sides with your legs. You're an accident waiting to happen, so don't even think about wearing spurs if you have to grip that horse's sides with your legs. All right, so now I got my horse going. Here's one of the biggest things that I see happen, or another mixed message I see happen when people want their horse to go. Watch what I do and tell me what I've done wrong. That's right, I pulled back on my reins. So again, I'm telling my horse to stop and go at the same time. It's the equivalent of putting on the gas and the brake at the same time. So with my students, they're going to hear me use 3 phrases. One phrase is give your horse his head, which means you're too tight on his mouth, so loosen up on your reins. The other phrase would be choke up, because your hand ended up back like so, so you need to slide your hand up and take more rein. And the third phrase is drop your hand, which means just drop your hand right on his withers. Your horse is doing exactly what you need him to do, so drop that hand, all's good. All right? So when you watch your Westerns, one of the things I can tell you for a fact is if you really pay attention, all right, I promise you that you will never watch Westerns the same, because I'm going to point out everything you'll see them do wrong. And there's quite a bit. I also think it's a shame that you have these great actors that look so silly on horseback, but that's a whole other story. One of the things you're going to notice when you watch your Westerns is that almost all the actors are holding the reins incorrectly. They're going to hold the reins like this, where their finger, their thumb, is pointed at the horse's neck. This is incorrect. The reason it's incorrect is look how easy it is for the horse to pull the reins out of my hands. So the way you are going to hold your hands is if you're holding an ice cream cone, all right, to where your knuckles are pointed forward and the reins come straight out of your hand. This is your best grip. It is very difficult for that horse to pull the reins out of my hands, all right? So it's crucial you're holding the reins correctly, all right? Plus it looks silly for any true horseman to watch somebody holding the reins like so. All right, so now I'm holding the reins correctly. Now, you do notice that I have my reins between my fingers. That's split reining. It's a whole other style of reining. That's another video. So I'm holding the reins correctly. For those of you that ride with knotted reins, I highly suggest that you take your reins. Well, first I'm going to show you how to find your checkpoint. Then I'll get to that point. All right. How do you know you have the proper length between the horse's bit and your mouth? What you're going to do is you're going to get a straight line from the horse's mouth to your hand right over the horn. You see this? I have a straight line from Zion's mouth right to my hand right over the horn. Once I have that this is called your checkpoint. Once I have my checkpoint, I'm going to bring my hand forward and just drop it on his neck and put the bend in the reins. The reason I want the bend in the reins is that when your horse walks, he has a natural bob to his head, all right? You want to allow for that bob in the walk, trot, and lope. In English riding, what you're going to notice is not only do they ride with a hand on each rein, they almost always have constant contact with the horse's mouth. And what they're going to say is that they're collecting their horse's head and whatever, I don't really ride English, but they're collecting their horse's head. Point being, there's always contact with the horse's mouth. In Western riding, your goal is to stay off your horse's mouth as much as possible, all right? The way I view the bit in the horse's mouth is similar to that of a pacifier in a baby's mouth. It's essentially there to soothe him, but also to help guide him and provide that leadership, as we were talking about. So your goal is to stay off your horse's mouth. In English, when they want to go left or right, they're going to pull on either side of the horse's mouth, all right? So the point is they're putting contact on the horse's mouth. In Western riding, your goal is to neck rein your horse. So where neck reining came about, cowboys realized early on that it wasn't going to work to hold the reins with both hands, so they needed a hand free. Since most cowboys were right-handed, it became standard practice to hold the reins with their left hand because they needed that right hand free to throw their rope. So standard practice is the left hand. Whether you use your right or your left, you just know that standard practice is holding the reins with your left hand. So I'm going to hold the reins in my left hand. When I want to neck rein my horse, 3 things are going to happen simultaneously, all right? The key word is simultaneously. It all happens together. So first off, make sure you have your checkpoint, all right? I've got my checkpoint and then I'm just going to drop my hand, all right? When I want to go to the left or to the right, those 3 things are, as I'm going to bring my hand straight out to the left. So I'm going to give you a couple golden rules right now, all right? First and foremost, your reining hand should never come behind the horn. Anytime you find your reining hand behind the horn, you lost your checkpoint. And that's when you need to choke up and get that checkpoint back. So don't come behind the horn. Secondly, these are the forks on your saddle. All right, these little bumps here, these are called the forks. What I want you to do is to pretend there's an imaginary line coming straight out from your forks. Now this is really important, all right? Straight line coming out from the forks. When I go to neck rein my horse, I'm going to come straight out to the left. If I do this to neck rein Zion, all right, and this is how I'm going to try to turn him to the left, what message am I giving him? I don't really know. I could be telling him to back up, stop, and go left. The point is it's confusing, and we're giving him a mixed message, so you don't want to do that. So it's going to be very fluid. I'm going to take my left hand and come straight out to the left. Now, when I do all my reining, it's low. I keep my hand below the horn, because I don't want to lift my horse's head. I want him to be able to drop his head and keep his natural form. So I'm going to keep my hand low, at most just right over the horn. All right? So all my reining is going to be low. Now I am going to bring my left hand straight out. All right? I'm using leverage. All right? So I'm going to be putting pressure against the right side of the horse's neck. And this same thing applies when I want to go to the right. So that's move number one. Move number two, I just shifted my weight into my left stirrup. So you didn't even notice it, right? But I shifted my weight into my left stirrup. So now Zion already feels my weight in the left stirrup. So he knows that I'm already planning to go left. With my right foot, I'm going to put pressure against his side, or kick if I have to. But the goal is to bring my hand straight out to the left, put weight into my left stirrup, put pressure against the right side of him. It's almost like when you're being poked, you're going to want to move away from the poke. So think this: when you go left, kick right. When you go right, kick left, all right? So it's going to look just like this. I'm sitting up straight in my saddle. My weight's in the stirrup. Look how my hand's straight out. So that was to the left. If I want to go right, I'm going to pull straight out to the right, put pressure against his left side. And see how fluid that was? It's all it takes. It's just nice and easy. But your legs play a very important role. So make sure you're using those legs. I can't tell you how many times people blow when they're neck reining their horses because they're kicking with the wrong leg. Again, plan your work. Work your plan. All right, so that's neck reining your horse. Now, sometimes you're going to get an ornery horse, or a horse is just not feeling it, all right? So your goal is, when you want to get your horse to turn, I want you to think of your horse as kind of like the front tire of a bicycle, all right? If that tire is not pointed in the direction you want to go, you're not going to go in that direction, all right? So ultimately, what you're going to want to do is plow rein. So I've tried neck reining. It's not working. So my next step is to plow rein. So in plow reining, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my goal is to get him to look where I want to go. So I'm going to take my left hand and slide it down. Now notice I said slide and not reach or bend, because here's another golden rule. Never ever find yourself looking past the horn. If you ever find yourself looking past the horn, you're top heavy and you're an accident waiting to happen. So what I'm going to do is take my left hand, I'm going to slide it down, and my goal is to guide his head out to the left, all right? Same thing applies to my legs. Same thing, all right? So my goal is to bring his head out to the left so he's looking in the direction I want to go. So in doing that, I'm going to hold the reins in my right hand. Now here's what's so important. If I'm going to try to guide his head out to the left, I have to make sure I've loosened up on that right rein. See how that's loose? Because when I bring his head around to the left, I want to make sure there's no pressure on the right side of his mouth, or I'm going to give him a mixed message. Again, because he's not sure which way I want him to go. So if I want to go to the left or to the right, the only thing that's going to change is I'm going to hold the reins with my left hand and bring my right hand down. So to go left, I'm going to hold the reins in my right hand. To go right, I'm going to hold the reins in my left hand. So this is what it's going to look like. To go right, or to the left rather, I'm holding the reins in my right hand. My left hand's loose, and I'm just going to reach down and pull them around and use my legs as necessary. But you see how he's looking where I want him to go? Now if I want to go to the right, I'm going to loosen up on that left rein and just bring his head around so he's looking in the direction I want to go. Notice, please notice, when I made my turns, I did not lean into my turn. Do not lean into your turns. You always want to stay centered and balanced, all right? Centered and balanced. So when you look down again, you should always be looking at the horn. Don't lean into your turns. So I want to get back to check and release again also. In checking with Zion, one of the ways I was able to get him to calm down is when he took off, we did a lot of check and release. Again, it's like pumping the brakes on your car. You pump your brakes because it's easier on your car and it's easier on your horse's mouth. So I'm going to check and release, check and release. You just get a sense of what your horse's mouth feels like and play with that. And that's how I was able to get Zion to just calm down and actually do as great as he's doing right now. Good job, buddy. So, check and release, check and release. Another good reason to check and release. If you've ever seen a runaway horse in the movies where their head's up high, the reason that they're a runaway horse is they got a hold of the bit in their teeth. And so you're not going to win that tug of war when you're pulling back. So when you check and release, you fool the horse because he thinks you're done. He'll let go of the bit. You check again, you can pull it right back into his mouth. So again, another good reason to check and release. All right. Getting back to plow reining. Sometimes when you're trying to bring your horse's head around, he's still not responding. So it's perfectly fine to give him little tugs on the side of his mouth, all right? Again, making sure that that other rein's loose. However, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people just jerking on their horse's mouth. Well, there's a huge difference between a tug and a jerk. So I want to point something out to you. Your goal in working with your horse is to teach them when they're doing something wrong. So in essence, you're disciplining your horse. When we have to discipline our horse, discipline derived from the word disciple. All right, and disciple means to teach. So when you're disciplining your horse, you're teaching. When you're punishing your horse, which to me is when you're jerking on your horse's mouth, and the reason you're doing this, or people on the ground where they're jerking on their horse's mouth with the lead rope, or worse yet, with the bit in their mouth, the reason they're doing that is because they're frustrated, they're angry, and their horse isn't responding to what it is they want to do. So essentially they're acting out and gaining some kind of emotional internal satisfaction by beating up on their horse. And I honestly believe most of them are not aware of it. Some of them might think it's a training technique. I don't agree with that. That's my preference. But your goal is to discipline your horse, not punish your horse. All right? All right. Well, now we got our horse going and we know how to steer him. So I want to recap a few things. Getting your weight down in your stirrups and having the proper footing is your positioning. You now have your proper positioning. To bring it all home, you should be able to draw an imaginary line. You should be able to draw an imaginary line from your ears through your shoulders, down through your hips to the back of your heel. So you're straight up and down, all right? This is my positioning. I now have the correct positioning. That's going to be crucial to my balance in finding my balance, all right? Without positioning, I'm not going to be able to balance myself. All right, so now we get to move into the meat of the program, how to sit the trot or the jog. Oh, by the way, just for semantics, jog and lope is equivalent to trot and canter. So if I mix the words, at least you know what I'm talking about. All right, in moving into the jog, I need to give you a little bit of history. Stirrups were not invented until about 100 BC. So prior to stirrups, everybody rode with dangling feet, all right? So they really depended on their hip movement to keep from bouncing. So your hips are going to play a major role, which I'm going to point out to you, all right? Once stirrups were invented, however, oh, and by the way, when I said 100 BC, for you history buffs, go ahead and watch some of those movies that are out there, like that are pre-100, and you'll see they're all riding in stirrups. So that's just bad on the historian. Once stirrups were invented, they realized right off the bat that the easiest way to ride the trot or the jog was to post. So posting has been around since the day stirrups were invented. Why do they post? When your horse trots, he has a 1-2 beat, which means 2 feet are hitting the ground at the same time. And so in English riding, they're counting the beats. So in essence, it looks like this. They're going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now, it's not the horse that's throwing them up. They're riding in rhythm with the horse. They're in balance with the horse. They're in sync. They're riding with the horse, all right? So, if I were to ask you this question, if I were even to ask a non-horse person this question, what sounds better, riding with your horse or on your horse? Most people would say with your horse, all right? And that's the focus of this video. I talked about stock seat. In stock seat, which again is the more popular method of Western riding, stock seat, just to give you some history, stock seat came about where cowboys had to spend long hours in the saddle. So in essence, what they did was they had a deep seat. So they put a lot of their weight right back on the cantle of the saddle. So kind of like plopping your butt right here. Relaxed legs and not as much weight in the stirrups. And as I said, that's the one thing I would want to change about stock seat because I don't believe it's as safe. So in this position in stock seat, you can see how now I'm sitting back on my horse. I talked to you about centered riding, where you're sitting up straight and you draw a line straight down from your ears through your hips down to your heel. In stock seat, you move more into this position. So what's happened now is I've placed my weight in 3 different places on the horse: the back, the middle, and the front. All right? In centered riding, when you look down, all you should see is your toes. All right? Anytime you see your whole foot, you're out of position. So in stock seat, the goal was to get your butt to roll with the saddle as the horse was trotting. So stock seat is more relaxed. It's much easier to learn, and that's probably one of the reasons people are riding. And it's a lot quicker to learn to not bounce. So I totally understand for the weekend warriors or people that are just going to ride on and off that stock seat would be the way to go if you're not going to get real serious about riding. What you also need to understand about stock seat, especially if you're starting out and you ride a lot, is people will tend to rub their tailbone raw from the rubbing of trying to ride with the saddle. Also, I've noticed the horses that are being ridden stock seat a lot, they tend to have the hair rubbed off right underneath where your butt sits on the saddle. So in essence, it is not my intent to by any means disrespect stock seat or stock seat riders, all right? All I'm trying to do is point out some facts. In centered riding, you're secure, you're balanced, and you have an independent seat. And that's what's key also, is that you have an independent seat. So what I want you to do is think about a jockey. When you look at a jockey on a racehorse, they're up off their horse's back, all right? They're leaning forward, but the key is that they're off the horse's back. The primary reason they're off the horse's back, some people will say, well, they're in that position for aerodynamics. Well, that plays a big role, but the primary reason they're off the horse's back is to give that horse complete freedom of movement. All right, they're allowing the horse to move. The horse is not having to lift them up. In stock seat, when you sit back on that horse, keep this in mind. With every step that horse takes when he trots and he lopes, he's having to lift dead weight. All right. In centered riding, I'm going to ride with my horse. All right. That's the focus of centered riding. So people will say, well, you still got weight on the horse. And it's like, okay, but from a physics standpoint, work with me. My weight is down low. I'm going to get off the saddle a little bit. So for instance, when I start trotting, you're actually going to see the saddle moving under me, which means I'm giving my horse complete freedom of movement. So I'm balanced, I'm secure with my weight in the stirrups, and I've got that independent seat. When you watch your movies, how can you tell if someone's riding stock seat, centered riding, or they're just simply bouncing? All you got to do is watch their hat, all right? When I ride centered riding, I want you to watch my hat. And by the way, when we move into the lope and in the trot, I highly recommend you wear a hat for centered riding, because this is going to be kind of like your barometer or tell you how well you're doing. When I trot, my hat's going to stay perfectly still. You're not going to see my hat doing this, all right? When you watch your Westerns and you see the hat bobbing up and down, one of two things is happening. Either they're riding stock seat and they're doing it well, so their butt's not leaving the saddle, that butt's glued to the saddle, but it's the horse that's lifting them up and down, or they're simply bouncing. When they're riding centered, that hat's going to stay perfectly still. I also want you to watch my hips, all right? Because my hips are going to play a big role. In centered riding, it does take some lower abdomen strength and so forth, but my hips are almost going to move imperceptibly. To drive my point home with the hips, as I start trotting, I'm going to take my feet out of the stirrups, all right? Now, when I take my feet out of the stirrups, this is where you start working on your balance, all right? So having your feet in the stirrups and sitting up straight is having the proper positioning, but then balance comes into play. So I'm going to show you this exercise when my feet come out of the stirrups on how to get just the hips to move. So think about this. When I trot, my hat's going to be perfectly still with my weight in the stirrups. when I take my feet out of the stirrups, you're not going to even notice I took my feet out of the stirrups because nothing is going to change with my hat. But I've gone from the majority of weight in my stirrups to all the weight in the seat of the saddle. But my hips are going to do all the work. So I'm going to let you know when I do that. But again, even with my feet out of the stirrups, my toes are going to be up and my heels are going to be down because my focus in my mind, body, remember, body, mind, is that I'm going to get my weight down low. I'm still thinking my weight's down low, letting my hips do the work. All right, so I'm going to talk you through this. I'm going to trot centered riding. What I want you to do again is watch my hand, my reining hand. My goal is to check and release. If Zion starts to speed up, I'm simply going to give him a little check and keep him at a nice slow trot. I believe most of you realize the slower your trot, the easier it is to sit. So I recommend that you really work on controlling your horse's trot. In mentioning control, the other thing that I really want to point out is it doesn't matter how well you sit the saddle. If you cannot control your horse, you're an accident waiting to happen, all right? So you need to make sure you're able to control your horse's speed. At any time you feel like it's not working for you, stop and breathe. Focus on what's going on, all right? All right, so I'm going to trot now, and I want you to watch my heels. Balls of my foot in the stirrup, check points. So I've got my balls of my foot in my stirrup, heels down, toes forward. I've got my checkpoint, all right? I'm going to drop my hand forward. I'm going to cue my horse to go, and this is what centered riding looks like in the trot. So, essentially, you can see how my heels are down. You can draw that imaginary line straight down. My hat's pretty much staying still. If you really watch the saddle, you can notice that it's moving underneath me, which means I'm giving Zion complete freedom of movement. Obviously, I'm holding the hand wrong hand, but just work with me. So this is essentially what it's going to look like, where my hat is staying pretty much still. Now, if you're just watching my hat, you didn't notice that I just took my feet out of the stirrups. With my feet out of the stirrups, it's all hip movement now. So you can see how my hips are moving with the horse. I'm still in that vertical position where I have the balance that we're talking about. Notice how I'm not using the reins to balance myself, all right? My free hand is relaxed. When you watch your movies, in fact, some of you have probably already experienced this, your free arm, when you start to trot, a lot of times it will start to come out like so. All right, I call this the chicken dance. I don't think I'm the only one, but I call it the chicken dance. They're using this arm to balance themselves. Your free hand should be totally relaxed, all right? So you want to keep it by your side. Pay attention to what that free arm is doing. I see so many people riding with a stiff arm, or like I said, out here. You want to work on relaxing that arm, okay? So you saw what it looked like when I was riding with my feet in the stirrups and how I was moving with Zion, okay? When I took my feet out of the stirrups, that was all working on balance. Feel free when you take your feet out of the stirrups to hold the horn if you need to. It's perfectly fine to bring your knees up just a little bit. You still want your toes up and heels down. You do not want to sit back, all right? You sit straight up in the saddle. Do not sit back. So I'm straight up in the saddle with my heels down and my toes up, all right? I can use my knee through my thigh as a brace, all right? I'm not squeezing. The key word was brace, all right? But ultimately, my goal is to relax my legs and bring them down so I'm back in my vertical position. So that's the goal that you're looking for, all right? Heels down, relax those legs. Again, feel free to hold the horn. If you find yourself holding the reins or using the reins to balance yourself, you need to stop, all right? You got to give your horse his head. Let him move freely. I can't tell you how many times I've watched Westerns where they're using the horse's mouth to balance their upper body. That is just so wrong, all right? So taking your feet out of the stirrups and working on that exercise is going to help you with your balance. And your ultimate goal, if you're wearing a hat, is to try to keep it as still as possible when you're trotting or jogging. Now, one of the other issues that people tend to have with their horses, especially stock seat riders, is when they go and kick their horse to go, they lose their stirrup. Well, why did they lose their stirrup? Primarily because there's no weight down in the stirrups. So your goal now in this next exercise, and by the way, I didn't say this was easy. Your goal in this next exercise is to learn to get that weight down into your stirrups, because that is what's going to help ensure that you're a safe rider. So, not everybody can do this exercise I'm about to show you, but if you can do it, it's going to be a huge payoff. But you must do it correctly. There are no shortcuts. Don't take what I'm showing you and try to just do your own thing. You have to do exactly what I'm showing you to do. So this is what you're going to do. You got your checkpoint, all right? With your free hand, you're going to hold the horn. Then you're going to take that elbow and pin it against your side. Literally pin it against your side, all right? You don't want any kind of extra movement. So don't bring that elbow out here. Don't think, oh, I can do it. I don't even need to use my hand. You need to hold the horn. You need to pin your elbow against your side. Your next step is you're going to stand up straight up in the saddle. So you see how I'm straight up and down, all right? The goal here, this is my crotch. Your goal is to bring your crotch right up to the horn. This is where most people blow it, all right? You bring your crotch up to the horn and your shoulders back. The reason I got my elbow pinned against my side is because if I let go, I am going to fall backwards. So I am literally holding myself up. Do not end up in this position. If you're doing this, it's incorrect and you might as well stop, because you're not going to get the desired result that you're looking for. So, crotch up to the horn. Heels down, shoulders back. When I look down, I'm looking right down at the horn, all right? I am not looking past the horn. Remember, if you find yourself looking past the horn, you are an accident waiting to happen. So you see how I'm perfectly up and vertical, all right? So watch what happens. All right, now we're trotting. Look at my hat. It's not even moving. It's perfectly still. Zion's moving underneath me, which means I'm giving him complete freedom of movement. Look how loose my rein is. I'm giving his head so that he can move freely. This is learning to get your weight down in the stirrups. It's helping you feel more secure. And in essence, you're also working on your balance, because my hips are it's hard to tell, but they're still moving back and forth with the motion of the horse. The purpose behind this exercise is that you're able to go from this, getting the weight down in your stirrups, to this. You're now riding centered. Your hat's still not bouncing. I still have an independent seat, which is allowing the horse to move underneath me. I'm giving him complete freedom of movement, but see how my hat is completely still. All right. I'm out of breath. I said this wasn't going to be easy. It takes work, all right? But it's imperative that you're able to do this correctly, all right? So, I gave you the feet out of the stirrups to work on your balance. And again, it's perfectly fine to hold that horn. Nothing wrong with holding the horn, all right? The horn's your friend, all right? Use the horn for stability, because again, it's imperative you're able to control your horse. So, those are 2 exercises that I gave you. Just so you don't get frustrated, I need to let you know that I've lost track of all the students I've worked with, but just a little history. I started teaching the horsemanship merit badge to Boy Scouts when I was 16, and I've been teaching on and off ever since. It's going to take you between 10 and 20 hours, if not longer, to master this, all right? It is not easy. And again, it's one of the reasons why I think, well, I'll give you 3 reasons why I think people don't ride centered riding. 1, they've never heard of it. 2, they tried it and they can't do it. Or 3, they just like stock seat, and no problem with that, all right? All right. Now, we're going to move into the lope. In moving into the lope, you need to understand that horses can be right and left-handed just like people. And they have preferences for what leads they take, all right? That's L-E-A-D. Horses need to be on their correct leads when you're loping. So an example would be this. If I'm loping around to the right, meaning his inside right leg is on the inside of the arena, that inside leg would be reaching out the farthest. So he's using that right leg. He's using that right leg to pull himself around. The outside leg takes a shorter stride. this means he's in balance, and it makes it a lot easier for me to sit the lope also. If he's on the incorrect lead, it's going to look like this. So you can see how it's a much choppier lope. So your goal is to get your horse on the correct lead. We talked about the use of your legs. This is where it's so crucial to learn how to use those legs properly, because that's going to play a huge role on getting Zion into his correct lead. All right? So, remember we talked about the jockey and how people get up off their horses, or they get off the horse's back to give them complete freedom of movement. What's so cool about centered riding is, how many of you have been to a rodeo? I'm going to assume that most of you have been to a rodeo. When you watch your barrel racers, they're going to get way up off the horse's back and kind of lean forward like so. You watch your calf ropers, they do the same thing. They get off the back of the horse and lean forward a little bit. Why? Again, to give the horse complete freedom of movement. What's so cool about centered riding is that I'm able to do that exact same thing, except in a much safer position. So I got my weight down low, I'm sitting up straight, but when I start to lope, as you'll see, that saddle's going to be moving underneath me, all right? So I'm giving my horse complete freedom of movement. My hat is going to stay perfectly still. You're not going to see it going up and down. So ultimately, I am riding with my horse. We're riding as one. And I tell you, once you experience this, it is so exhilarating. All right, so I'm going to show you what it looks like now to ride the lope. In riding the lope, some people, like when you're working on your centered riding, you're going to struggle with the trot or the jog. It's going to take you a little while. But you may find that once you start loping, it comes a lot faster in the lope, because most people would agree it's much easier to sit the lope than it is to sit the jog. All right? So this is what centered riding looks like in the lope. All right, so you can see how I'm giving Zion his head. If you pay attention, you could really see the saddle moving underneath me. Notice how my hat is perfectly still. I am literally gliding with my horse right now. I'm giving him his head and allowing him to move freely. I have that vertical line that we talked about, so don't forget the line. You got to stay balanced and in position. I'm giving him his head, my hands down low. We're literally just moving together. If I went to stock seat, I would now sit back on my horse and my feet would come out a little bit further. And now he's having to lift dead weight. And you can see how my hat's starting to move. So going back to centered riding, I'm straight up and down. Notice how relaxed my free hand is. It's nice and smooth. I tell you, I take a lot of comfort knowing that Zion is not having to lift dead weight and I'm moving along with him. So once you get this down, I'll tell you, it's just pure exhilaration. All right, that was a lot for, 45 minutes or whatever we talked about. So in conclusion, what I want you to understand is centered riding is a body-mind, mind-body approach. It's all about positioning and balance. That is essential. You got to pay attention to your body from head to toe, toe to head. Now, I've shown you essentially what centered riding looks like. I exercises to work with to get there. In picking your instructor, or if you're going to pick an instructor or have an instructor, you now know what centered riding looks like. So ask them if they can ride centered. If they can't, you have a decision to make. All right. I spend some time specializing in equine therapy. Time and time again, I've seen the magic horses can perform on people. You could go home and you can turn on the news and within 3 minutes you're depressed. You can come get on a horse and within 3 minutes all's right with the world. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again because I think it's so important. Most problems we have with our horses, I believe we've created. All right, so self-created. My hope for you is that you have the insight and the fortitude to be able to assess what's going on with your body when things aren't working with your horse. that you're able to just stop, focus on your breathing, focus on what it was you were trying to do and why it went wrong and what you could do differently. So in essence, plan your work, work your plan. All right? So, mind, body, body, mind. Keep in mind your heart rate sets the tone, so focus again on your heart rate. I have a lot of admiration for people that are out there rescuing horses. The irony is I kind of feel like it's the horse that rescues us. I hope you found this video to be helpful, and if so, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button. And if you have any suggestions, comments, or other topics you'd like me to cover, feel free to throw it out there. Not sure where it will go, but go ahead and throw it out there. But I need to be very clear on this. I did not make this video to make money. So if you make comments and I don't respond, please don't take it personally, all right? But I would appreciate the comments. Feedback is always great. Now I'm going to leave you with a couple tips. First and foremost, when you take your saddle off your horse, please slide it back beyond the withers, clear the withers, and then take your saddle off. Unlock it, so to speak, instead of just pulling it off over the side of his withers. And secondly, I can't tell you how I've heard time and time again, people say, lean forward, lean backwards when you're going up or down hills. Physics-wise, that's incorrect, all right? Here's your horse. Here's your horse. Come on, work with me. We're almost done. Here's your horse. Here's you. Sit up straight in the saddle, all right? So your head's pointed at the sky. So when your horse is going, we're almost done. Sorry, you see some horses going. When your horse goes uphill, you're leaning forward. When your horse goes downhill, you're leaning backwards. So don't overdo it with the leaning. So bottom line, let the horse do the leaning for you. And you, my friend, stay centered. May God bless you. And as my childhood idol used to say,